Yeah, we're not just weirdos who lied our way into having a panel.
I mean, yeah, so. All right, so this person over here is the most amazing, wonderful person ever. She's my wife. This is Caitlin. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background?
Hi, my name is Caitlin Farthing. I'm an art restorer / conservator and historian. In art restoration, I work within the disaster restoration industry. With in art history, my research is primarily in what we call visual narrative shorthand, which is how we use aesthetics to convey information that cannot be spoken.
And my name is Alex. I have a PhD in music history from Boston University. And my specialty is basically music as a means of narrative shorthand. How does music get used in film? How does it get used in movies, in video games, in narrative media?
Yep. So watching TV with us is wildly insufferable.
Or highly entertaining, depending on how much of a geek you're willing to be about
Block
it.
us from the pause button. We will stop it many times, and we will not shut up.
All right. So the panel that you are here to see is called "We Can Rebuild Him. We Have the Technology: The Case for and Against Remakes." So as Caitlin mentioned, we are not going to be reviewing or analyzing too many of these things. We are going to look at a couple of things that are kind of analytical, but by and large, this is going to be kind of very broad strokes talk about the history of remakes, what remakes mean, what kind of things do they signify to us right now, and so forth. So let's just very quickly go over. I always like giving a synopsis of what we're going to talk about so that you're not wasting your time, so that you know what you're in for the next 60 minutes.
Yep.
So at the beginning, we're going to do a very, very abridged history of remakes in visual art, starting with the Renaissance, moving on to 18th, 19th centuries and film, and then we're going to talk about video game remakes, also a very brief, very condensed history. I would love to give you a comprehensive analysis of that history, but then we will be here all weekend.
It's like we have an hour.
You have things to do, and so do we.
We also talk fast.
Right.
So if we're talking too fast, apologies. This will be on YouTube in a couple of months, so then you can play it back and put us at half speed.
One thing that I will say right now, before I forget, if you are interested, please, because we do have a bibliography and an outline of this, and the outline is pretty much what we're going to talk through today. If you want that, at the end of this talk, we will have all of our social media contact information up there: email, TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram. Ping us on one of those platforms. I will gladly forward you the entire document that has footnotes, citations, endnotes, what have you.
We put a lot of work into this. Yeah. We're always happy to share it.
So because, I don't believe in confining academia to paywall, just let me know. I will send you everything I have. That's always how I operate. Then we're going to talk about what makes a remake, talk about defining remakes and the narrative behind them, and then we're going to do a little bit of analysis, just a tiny bit, nothing boring. Then we're going to kind of bring it all together by talking about the case for and against remakes, like why are they good, why are they maybe not as beneficial as some people claim they are. And then the last section is going to be Don't At Me, which is my hot takes. This is where I turn off my body cam and tell you some really fucking unhinged shit. Fun fact, we say the fuck word a lot, so if that's a problem, I apologize. We'll try to keep the spicy language to a minimum. Sometimes it just slips out like it did now. So yeah, without further ado, let's dive in. So we're going to begin with the Renaissance. This is all you.
Yeah, so remakes have existed since long before the Renaissance. The Renaissance is just where we have the most documented early record of remakes. The Renaissance art was primarily remaking Greek and Roman art. And we know, the Greeks and Romans were remaking each other constantly. The Middle Ages was remaking the Greek and Romans. Everyone is remaking everybody else constantly. But in the Renaissance, we have this big push to remake Greco-Roman art, mostly in a response to the Middle Ages, because everything is a response to everything else. You get tired of one thing, you want to do something different. You want to prove that you're better than the people who came before you. One of the other things that we need to talk about really quickly in the Renaissance is that art was not what we view fine art as today. A painter was not like this genius locked in their studio making really salient takes about society. Art was a skill. Art was a job that you learned how to do. You worked in a workshop under a master, you proved your skills, and then you got to start your own workshop. And the main way you proved your skills was by copying your master's work over and over and over again until you could do it perfectly, and then you could start your own studio.
Yeah, and the primary driving force behind this, of course, were the wealthy elite of the cities like Firenze and Venezia. So in Firenze, you had the House of Medici, which were basically in control of the banks and the finances, whom you might remember from games like Assassin's Creed. And then the House of Orseolo in Venezia was largely controlling the maritime trade routes and essentially controlling like the way goods and services came into and out of the city-state of Venice. Them you will not know from Assassin's Creed 2 because they were magically left out.
Yeah.
But they were also the ones who were responsible for bankrolling the San Marco and the Ducal Palace in Venice.
Yeah, that was the era of rich people having pet weirdos.
That's right. So one of the things that's really interesting to me about the way Renaissance approaches copying from the Greeks is that they essentially take this idea that was introduced by Greeks and refining it to its utmost kind of terminal point. So the philosophy of humanism basically ascribes primacy to the human form. The human form is intended to be paramount above all other forms, so you want to study it, you want to examine it. This is why Da Vinci has multiple notebooks that are filled with nothing but sketches of hands and feet,
Yeah.
right?
This is also the era where we see that math and art are not separate things. Math and art go together constantly. You cannot separate them from each other in this point in time, which is why Da Vinci was doing math as well as, fine art sketches all
Right,
the time.
yeah. Being a polymath was considered to be kind of the
Yeah.
definitive thing. Like, if you were doing art, you were also doing other disciplines. So one of the best, probably most salient examples of this is the way Michelangelo's David uses this Greek idea of contrapposto, where the posture is imitated in the sculpture that was done by Polykleitos, called Doryphoros. So you can see them right here on the top left.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
So this is our Greco-Roman example, and this is our Renaissance example.
Right. So it's the same posture, same basic body language, a lot of very similar ideas. But one thing you can see about the David is that there's so much more detail about it. Everything is intended to be as true to life as possible. There's this concept of verisimilitude, which is the appearance of being true to life, that we're going to be coming back to over and over, because this is going to be an incredibly important aspect of why remakes are the way they are. So the next thing is, by the time we get to the high Renaissance, so we're talking like the late 1400s, early 1500s, we start developing schools of painting. And these schools develop rivalries.
Yes, everyone had beef with each other, and the main way they did it was by making art and going, hey, I took your thing and I can make it better than you can. And then the original person going, no, I can make it better than you can. And this was also propagated by rich people who wanted to have better art than their friends to show off how smart and wealthy and interesting they were. So they were constantly buying art from these rival workshops and studios to say, hey, well, you have this piece. I have the better version of that piece, back and forth. Art creation and collecting at this time was really just a wild series of beefs.
Yeah.
Everyone was beefing with everybody else.
Yeah, there's a reason why, and I mean, I hate to bring up Assassin's Creed 2 yet again, but there's a reason why one of the main currencies for accumulating wealth in your villa is buying and collecting art, right? You go to like all these different art shops and you buy all these they're wildly asynchronous with each other, but like the point is that you buy and collect art from this period, right? And so this is very, very similar to what private collectors would do, is they would purchase art. And this market for the attention economy kind of spurred several very high-profile rivalries. Specifically in the city of Venice, we had this trio of painters, Tiziano Vecellio, whom you might know as Titian, Jacopo Robusti, who was also known as Tintoretto, and Paolo Cagliari, who was better known as Veronese. And so they had these competing workshops that would essentially take the same ideas and tropes and then iterate upon them. So if you take a look over here on the left, the painting of Esther by Tintoretto features kind of like a very offset series of levels where you have the woman on the bottom right, the man is positioned on the top left. You have like kind of a group of people contrasted with a singular person on the left. And then Veronese did something very, very similar with Christ healing a woman a few years later. And he was like, okay, cool, so we can take this idea, but we can soften the colors, we can kind of make this a little bit more different stylistically, but at the same time, we're still iterating on a very similar formula. There's this idea of contrast, there's this idea of juxtaposing single with group. So a lot of these ideas end up percolating from one artist to another and end up kind of filling that space with a number of works that are iterative, but still distinct distinctly unique.
This is also where we get in workshops when someone was skilled enough to go start their own. Oftentimes, working for an artist was not fun. It was a lot of the same work over and over and over again. So a lot of journeymen and people who came up at this time did not like the masters that they learned from and were trying very hard to prove that they were better than them. So it was a lot of intentionally trying to improve upon what their master had done, had made them do.
Right, and so Caitlin actually very correctly touched on this, is that these workshops were usually founded by recognized masters like Da Vinci, Peter Bruegel in the Low Countries, and Paul Rubens in the Netherlands. So all of them kind of had this lineage of having a master at the head. And all of the students were intended to emulate and replicate the works of their masters. And so this was done for a variety of reasons.
One, it allowed for art to be made significantly faster. If you don't have to prep your own boards, prep your own canvases, draw your own outlines, put your own base paint layers down, you can do all the fun, fiddly, really high skill stuff much faster than if you have to do everything yourself. So when you first started as an artist, your job was gessoing canvases and boards, and that's all you did all day until you finally proved yourself to be able to actually touch a paintbrush. It's kind of similar, if everyone's familiar with the way Thomas Kincaid studios currently work, where one artist makes the image and then it's reproduced by a bunch of other people, and then there's one person who has to sit there and do all of the little embellishments so you can pay an extra bit for your canvas. It was very similar to that.
Yeah, the other one is that, of course, it was a consolidation of artistic style for the purposes of being distinctive. You can never confuse a Da Vinci with a Raphael, right? Yeah. They have very distinct visual styles, and that was part of the hallmark. You distinguished yourself from your competitors by doing things differently from them and better than them. And then lastly, it's just the idea of refining and learning from experience. Any of you music school students here? Okay, have any of you taken a jazz class on a college level? Okay, especially jazz composition or jazz practicum. Okay, so one of the first things that will happen is your professor will probably hand you a solo by a famous musician like Miles Davis, Bill Evans, John Coltrane, and say, transcribe this, right? They're not doing this so that you can emulate the solo note for note. They're doing it so you can deconstruct it to the molecular level and understand why it's being done, right? Why is Coltrane playing running eights? Why is Miles Davis using a mode, right? And then you can incorporate that into your own musical language so that you can capitalize on the work that was already done before you. And so this is exactly the way the old masters worked. You would have to copy the Mona Lisa in order to understand why Da Vinci did it a certain way, right?
This is also why when you take an introduction to drawing class, everyone has to draw the same thing. They are not stifling your creativity, they are teaching you how to draw.
Right. Yeah. And of course, this was actually kind of an interesting thing, because having a person talking back to the subject of the economy of attention and how art was valued, having a individualized or a very limited edition version of a painting, for instance the two we have here by Bruegel, the top one was done by the father and the lower done by the son. They're virtually the same painting with very small, very noticeable, distinct differences that are unique to each painter. And so owning one versus owning the other would create a sense of, pride and accomplishment, really. You were able to distinguish one from the other, and you had the good sense and taste to possess one and be able to explain why this is the more valuable one. So it kind of put you above the rank and file and their misunderstanding of art.
Also, if you've ever been to the Walters Museum of Art, there is a great section of it called the Cabinet of Wonders. This is the time period we start to see that, where the idea of collecting things means you understand them and therefore understand the world. And you can show off how smart and interesting and cool you are.
Absolutely.
And better than everyone around you.
So things start kind of changing around the 18th century. But before that, we also have a number of painters, specifically Albrecht Dürer, who was very opposed to having copies of his art made. So Dürer was the one that has all these really intricate, very, very refined woodcuts that you probably recognize. And he kind of defined a lot of the stylistic characteristics of Renaissance woodcuts. So he was very, very strongly opposed to people imitating his style, because this style was his trademark. And over the course of the next couple of centuries, by the time we get to 1734, that's the really important date, because that is when William Hogarth, an English painter, kind of went out of his way to say, hey, there's a lot of copies of my work out there. I don't like this. I am going to take all of those people who copied my work and try to sell it for profit to court. So the court case of the Engraving Copyright Act of 1734 was really important because the Parliament Court ruled that there's two things that came out of this. One is that there was legal protection for the producers of engravings. So these are the conditions under which you can recreate art, but you have to do it within these parameters. And the other one is that distinguished between artist and craftsman. Do you want to speak to that?
So this is also really where we talk about how important technology is in the way that art is created and copied. Because as I'm sure you're all familiar with the Gutenberg press and how our first, printing presses were type because that was easy to carve copies of. And woodblock prints are the same thing. It's quite literally you are carving down a block of wood. That takes a lot of skill, and carving down wood to print ink on it, it's very limiting in what you can do. When we get to engraving, which is where you are actually like taking a metal plate and drawing into it with a stylus and then etching it with acid, you're able to create much more detailed imagery. You're able to create gradients, which was not really possible with woodblock before then. So a woodblock print could, in theory, try to look like a painting, but it wasn't going to happen. There was no way you were going to confuse a woodblock for the original painting. But an engraving could look a lot like a painting, particularly to an untrained eye. And for someone who could not go see that painting, buying a cheap engraving of it was maybe their only option to get to it, but that meant that now artists were losing out on people buying their paintings because now people could buy engravings and copies of their work and copies made without their permission.
There was also like a pretty big push in the Renaissance to move away from a particular kind of like tempera-based paint to a different one, as well as treated wood panel versus canvas, which also like in many ways amplified the way the art was visible and seen, and also how it could be preserved and like conserved for future generations.
And even just the size of your paintings or how quickly you could make them.
Right, yeah, because by the time you get to like early Baroque, late Renaissance, you start seeing paintings that are very, very large compared to like the really tiny ones. How many of you have seen the Mona Lisa in real life? It's tiny.
It's tiny.
Yeah, it's really, really small. But by the time you get to Veronese, you start seeing these massive canvases because again, the technology allowed for that.
Yep.
Okay. So by the time we get to the
We're now going to jump a couple hundred years.
Yeah, we're going to get to the 19th. The next big advancement in technology and remakes, of course, obviously is movies and photography. Now, photography is an interesting thing, and I'm not going to speak too much about it because it was still very much in its nascent state, so it was very difficult to reproduce the same photograph multiple times. I mean, there's obviously ways to do it, but movies is the one that's more interesting because as soon as the language of cinema started to become mainstream, cinematographers immediately realized like, oh, we could do this multiple times. So because again, there was such a limited collection of things you could do with film, like early movies are basically a big nothing burger. Like they're just recorded moving pictures of things that are happening in real life. But one of the first remakes was in 1896 when Georges Méliès, that's the guy who did the moving image of the horse that he bet somebody like money that he could do, copied and reproduced Louis Lumiere's Partie de Cartes. So that was like one of the first major remakes in film. And after that, obviously, we also have to talk about how the medium becomes the message, right? To quote Marshall McLuhan. Film is interesting because it is not preserved, stored, and distributed the same way that paintings are. Paintings exist in kind of a cultural formaldehyde. The painting is the painting unless it is a copy, in which case it's still very clearly paying homage to the painting.
How many of you have taken an art history class? Good.
Oh, fantastic. That's great.
How many of you were told that you had to go to the museum and see it in person in order to write your analysis? Yeah, there's a reason. Because if you're like me, you saw a painting you were very deeply in love with in your art history books, and then you saw it in person and went, oh my God, the photo did not do this justice.
Yeah. Or, this looks like absolute doo-doo.
Yeah. To experience a painting in real life is very different than to see a photograph of it. But we can replicate photographs far easier than we can paintings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So medium and storage become an interesting consideration. So one of the main factors in how we conserve and store film was World Wars I and II. Before World War II, there wasn't really a concerted move to conserve art because there was no need to conserve it.
Yeah, but the idea of preserving the past for the future really comes out of the wanton destruction of World War I and World War II. There was work being done, but it was not as wholesale as it is now, and it was not such a industry that I have a master's degree in, until we started losing art that could not be replaced.
And one sterling example of this is the movie Metropolis from 1927, which was thought lost until like 1951, I think, because they thought all copies were destroyed, like during the Weimar Republics and the Nazi purges. But then suddenly somebody like opened up a case that had film in it, and it was like, oh, it's Metropolis in its unedited, untouched form. And everybody lost their little minds about it. They're like, we have to get this to a conservator. We have to digitize this copy, and we have to do this, and we have to do that and the other. So like, this is the reason that Metropolis is now widely available on YouTube for free, right? Because it's such an incredible cultural staple that we can't let go of. Film rights and distribution become another thing because, as you might know, early Hollywood was extremely predatory. Like, you think it's predatory now, it was way worse. Hollywood used to own artists, like basically like pets. Like, they would pay them scraps and they would like force them to do film after film after film after film until their contract expired or they got bored of them. So film rights and distribution were usually tied up in kind of weird legal limbos where one studio would own an artist, but another studio would own the IP, and another studio would own like the projector on which like the film would be recorded. So it was all like really, really weird. And so by the time we get to the 80s, we have this notion of the artist as an auteur in film, which is why we have like definitive editions like Blade Runner, why we have like the Terminator 2 definitive like director's cut, and then we also have to talk about defunct media, how some of the, like, again, the medium guides the message, but the medium is also going to kind of lock you out of certain types of message.
Yes.
Like, like how many of you have seen like Betamax tapes lately?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. We have like, I don't want to like break character here, but like in the Video Game Conservation Museum, like one of the things that they're really talking about there, and if you get a chance, please go, they talk about how some of these systems are on borrowed time because like you can't reproduce this hardware anymore.
Yeah.
It degenerates.
I regularly at my job where I do this kind of work get calls about people who have actual floppy disks with information on them, and they're like, how do I get it off? And I'm like, you can't. Yeah. You might find someone somewhere that has a machine that can do this for maybe another couple of years.
But like media also deteriorates. Nothing is forever. Yeah. Like if it's plastic, it's going to eventually devolve into dust. Yeah. So like there's no guarantee that media is going to be intact on that disk, even if you do get a drive to read it. Okay, so 30
all
minutes
of that.
Now we're getting to the meat and potatoes of the subject. What about video games? So you guys just sat through this like 30-minute lecture and like, so like, why aren't you going to talk about games now? We're going to talk about them now.
That was all important context for video games.
Right. So the purpose behind remakes in video games is actually really, really, really simple originally. They weren't made out of some great artistic need. They weren't made with conservation in mind. They were made because certain pieces of software were really specific and fiddly, and hardware was extremely specialized. So if you wanted to run something on something else, you had to modify it and port it.
There we go. This is also where we talk about how games were originally created as a pastime, not as an art form.
Right.
So the idea of a remake as an artistic discussion isn't really a thing. This is, how many of you remember having like an old Sega console and then trying to want to play the same game on like a PlayStation? It was physically impossible. You couldn't, the hardware and the software physically could not talk to each other. So if you were coming out with new hardware, you had to update the software to play games on it. There was no like porting it over super quickly. You had to make a new one.
And this kind of brings us to this notion of future shock, because in some cases, hardware evolves faster than we can keep up with it, right? And we'll talk about this in just a minute. But like some of the notable early remakes are Taito's Gunfight, which is featured right up here on top right. The reason we have Western Gun is because, again, like, the notion of intellectual property and copyright was kind of very hazy and nebulous around the time, but also the Midway hardware was just better at rendering pixels and doing like faster animations. So porting it from the really, really janky Atari or the Taito arcade software, which was very clumsy and cumbersome, to the Atari on Midway's the Atari hardware, the board that this game was on, it was kind of the natural next step, right? Because you would have access to it. Atari's Adventure in 1980 was actually a remake of a text-based adventure called Colossal Cave Adventure. So again, graphics were very limited, and adding that extra dimension was something that was in line and in step with the development of current technology. By the time we get to the 1980s, this is where we start really accommodating shifting hardware standards, and seeing a lot of this happening. Games start being re-released on personal computers and different hardware systems because if you want, like the Atari 2600 is obsolete, but you still want to play Pitfall, fantastic. You can purchase it for the Master System. On PC, you couldn't get an update for your software, like for your operating system. You couldn't just plug your computer into the internet. There was no internet.
Yep.
Right?
This is also when we see, because computers no longer take up an entire room and can in fact fit in your entertainment system under your TV at home, you don't have to go to the arcade anymore to play games. You can sell direct to the consumer, which means you can sell significantly more copies than you ever did before.
Yeah.
So if you want to make a lot of money, you want to sell a lot of things to a lot of people, so you're going to keep making the things that you know are going to sell.
Any fans of Space Quest here? The original adventure games by Sierra? Okay, so you remember how the first three Space Quests were basically text-based adventures with like a graphical interface? There was a remake of Space Quests 1 and 2, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s that used VGA graphics up from the original 16-color EGA. And then also, instead of using a text prompt, it used the mouse because the mouse now became more standard with PCs. So instead of using the cumbersome arrow keys and typing the text prompt, you could just click on the thing, boom, done, right? So hence the update. Okay, the 1990s starts seeing a push towards chronicling and cataloging games. So we start seeing games like Super Mario All-Stars, which included Mario 1, Mario 2, Mario 3, and then the Lost Levels, right? So this is mostly done for concatenation and for cataloging because now we have cartridges that can accommodate multiple games instead of just several bytes of data. But also, we start seeing this because we are starting to understand that these are valuable pieces of media
history
that need to be chronicled. So we have Super Mario, we have Ninja Gaiden, Sega Aegis does a bunch of different releases talking like all of their classics from the Master System and the Genesis. And CD-ROM plays a really important role.
Yes.
This is something you touched on
So this is
earlier.
one of the things where previous, like I mentioned with the Sega and the PlayStation, previous to the introduction of the CD-ROM, your software was hardware. Your little cartridge, it was essentially its own hardware. But when we invent the CD-ROM, you can take that from your computer to your PlayStation. CD-ROMs become hardware agnostic almost, which allows for an incredible translation of your media across mediums.
Yeah,
essentially.
absolutely.
And this makes, one, significantly more accessible. Two, we can put a lot more information on a CD.
It's cheaper,
Three,
too.
it's easier to make, and it's a lot cheaper to make.
Yeah.
So this allows us,
So the 2000s, this is where the concept of future shock begins to catch up with us. So consoles in the 2000s, so think about the consoles that were released. Xbox, GameCube, PlayStation 2. Right on the heels of that, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Nintendo Wii. These were all incredibly advanced consoles. And the problem is, as they exponentially rose in their processing power, in their visual processing ability, we didn't really have an ability to code for them yet. We kind of figured this shit out as we went, right? So this is why a lot of Xbox 360 games look the way they look. You guys all know about like the yellow filter and the Vaseline
soft, fuzzy
smear,
edges.
right? Okay, that's because we were trying to figure out bloom and we were trying to figure out color grading and LUTs and things like that.
We had so many more tools available to us in the aesthetics of the games we were
and
creating.
we just didn't know what to do with them, so we threw everything in the kitchen sink in an attempt to figure out a cohesive language for visually communicating these ideas. So we're also starting to mainstream a lot of ports and remakes because now we have the ability to purchase these things, and as nerd culture became more and more mainstream, so did these games. Everybody had a PlayStation 2, everybody had a Xbox 360, right?
This is also where we see the 30-year nostalgia cycle hit video games, because suddenly everyone who grew up playing in an arcade can have this at home, and it looks so much better than you ever remembered it on the arcade screen, and you don't have to, put on pants to play your favorite games
that's right.
anymore.
Well, I mean, that's one of the main reasons for Bionic Commando. Bionic Commando, until Capcom revived it, was kind of like this game that everybody loved, right? And then we have this updated for the modern times, Bionic Commando, wife his arm.
This is also when we start getting the technology that lets us to add more narrative into games. We have enough room in the technology to not just focus on the visual, not just the game input, but we can now have narrative and voice acting and expression on the characters' faces. We can start making more points that we maybe wanted to make in these original games and just didn't have the technology to do it.
And this need to do this kind of creates this balancing act between quality and homage. Like, to what extent do you want to replicate the old thing, or to what extent do you want to push it ahead, and how will that affect the overall quality of your product, right? So, like, again, I bring up Bionic Commando because it's nothing like the original Bionic Commando game. It has more in common with, like, Spider-Man games, right? But the idea was that it was innovative enough to the point where, like, it may not have been, like, fully understood in its own time, but it actually has some really interesting mechanics that are still being used to this day, like in some of Insomniac's games and some of, like, the Arkham games. Some of this stuff is really, really interesting, and so it's recursive. So this is replicating some of those ideas of the Venetian art schools of Renaissance. Moving ahead, 2010s. Okay, so this is where the market gets fully flooded with nostalgia. Hey guys, remember playing Monkey Island on your dinky old PC, like the 286 SX processor? Hey, guess what? You can recapture that. You can have those good feelings about Guybrush Threepwood and LeChuck, and all it's going to cost you is $30 on the game marketplace. Come on down. Mortal Kombat. Hey, remember playing that in the arcades? You can play all of those games at home right now. They're all in one DVD. Only $59.99. Final Fantasy V Remaster. Remember those games? Those are great. $60.
So this is where we see like the continuous and technological advancement from the 2000s and the nostalgia marketing. But now we're in the 2010s when we're right off a financial crisis, so everyone has money for the first time in a couple of years, and two, fandom is mainstream. This is one of the first times that fandom becomes part of mainstream popular culture and not a thing you're ashamed of and don't tell your most of your friends in high school. As a 2014 Tumblr girly, I'm not sorry.
Nor should you be. But this is also like one of those interesting times when a lot of the new rank and file of game developers look at old games and say, hey, these were full of mistakes, we got to fix them. But the thing is that they're not mistakes necessarily. How many of you have played the original Arkham Asylum?
Ooh.
Good. How many of you have played the Return to Arkham version? Okay. I recommend doing both, and you'll notice that one is definitely prettier than the other, but the moon is not green anymore.
Yeah, it was assumed that a lot of these choices that were made either around the technology or for in artistic reasons were mistakes that needed to be fixed.
And the thing is, those are deliberate choices.
Yes, and so this is what we talk about a lot with discussions about remakes, is they assume mistake instead of artistic intent, and then you kind of miss the intent, the original intention.
It's not a feature, it's a bug, and the bug needs to be squashed.
This is something that happens, that we talk about a lot these days because we are overrun with remakes.
So speaking of being overrun with remakes, here we are. So I did the math. In the 2010s, as in the entire decade, we had about 300 remakes, all told, for all like mobile, console, PC, whatever. We are now halfway, just slightly over halfway into this current decade. We have 200 remakes and counting. This coming year, there's going to be like 30 high-profile remake games. And there's more on the horizon. So the market is not slowing down, right? So the reasons for this, I'm just going to go through this really quick, is that they're risk-averse. The companies who make them are risk-averse, and remakes come with a built-in audience.
Also, everything's expensive now. Yeah. You can't make a game for cheap like you used to in the early 2000s. Yeah. Games now have to be like $3 million minimum to make a solid game with the way graphics and
it's like that triangle, right?
Days.
Good, cheap, fast, big two.
Yeah, with some exception, like bless the developers of Silksong, we love you very dearly.
Absolutely. No, but it did take them like 7 years to make it.
Yeah, exactly. It took them forever.
Yeah, it's like good, cheap, fast. You have to pick two.
So yeah, it's extremely expensive. And again, no one has money right now. The world is on fire. No one's going to take a $3 million risk on a game that might or might not sell. I'm
going to skip past this because like you all know the difference between a remake and a remaster. I'm not going to belabor the point, but let's get to what remakes a remake. The meta-narrative behind them. So there is a quote from Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and that is, "You exist because we allow it." And the same can be applied to remakes, is that they exist because we keep buying them.
We keep giving them the money.
We like old things, so we're like, hey, money.
Look,
and they're
I'm not gonna lie. If BioWare came out with a good way to play Dragon Age Origins in this day and age, I would give them so much money for it. So much money.
But so what they're doing essentially is they're updating the aesthetic vision of the originals to a technological standard of today.
Yes.
They're essentially future-proofing these games. In some ways, this is good because in those ways we can still access and play those games, like with the Metal Gear Solid collection. But on the other hand, the Metal Gear Solid collection is not very good. Okay, that's my hot take. There's also like the needing to bring games up to code with compatibility issues, right? So like PlayStation 2, great piece of hardware. Why? Because you could play PlayStation 1 games on it. All of them, literally every single one of them, because the BIOS and the firmware for the PlayStation 1 was built into 2. Can't do that with the PlayStation 3. Certainly can't do it with 4. There's a reason they're selling you the same copies of the same games on the PlayStation Store. Like, hey, do you want to play Rogue Galaxy? $40.
Yeah.
Right. And that's because like the code is lost, one, and two is that the BIOS and the framework for these games is just no longer viable.
On top of that, you know, like we talked about, metal and plastic will break down over time.
Yeah.
The way that we used to make chips, boards, all of the things that make a console, we don't make them anymore. We don't use those same materials anymore. So trying to put an old game that's designed for old hardware on new hardware just doesn't work. They just don't talk to each other anymore.
That and the distinct technical limitations of the old systems. Like for instance, over here I have two screenshots, one from Assassin's Creed Original and one from Assassin's Creed Ezio Collection. The original had a very interesting narrative hook, is that you were essentially experiencing the memory through a dream. Right? In fact, in that very scene, you can see that everything is kind of tinted with this blue-green color. The music that plays in Venice is called The Dream of Venice, right? And then, meanwhile, the Ezio Collection basically said, like, hey, you know what this game needs? More photorealism.
Yeah, so we went from the aesthetics of the game telling you, hey, you are in a dream. This is not real. This is why you can jump 40 stories down and land in a hay bale and live.
Yeah, it's all part of the narrative, yeah.
Now it has to look hyper-realistic.
Yeah, and that doesn't work. It's basically putting PS5 wallpaper on a PS3 house.
And you now have missed the point that you were making.
Right, yeah. So, and like I'm about to show you in the next couple of slides, it undermines some of the narrative and subtextual things.
So this is one of my favorite images about remakes. This is the original Cinderella VHS from 1988, the digitized version, and then this is the 4K DVD from a couple of years ago. And you see, in trying to update this for new technology, you lose a lot of fidelity. Yes, hand.
That could well be it. I can't speak to this because I'm not a Disney person.
But yeah,
okay,
so like
fair enough.
This is the loss of fidelity in trying to update it for modern technology.
Listen, we don't know everything. Like we're not Wikipedia. There's a limit to our knowledge. Like, thank you for correcting us. We appreciate it.
What I'm saying is that nature is slowly starting to heal.
I hope you're right, man. All right, so let's talk about some of my favorite picks. Okay, Resident Evil 4. I mean, can you tell I like it? So the original is probably as close to a perfect game as you can get. One of the things that I keep coming back to in my talks about Resident Evil is that there's a laser pointer. This is important for a couple of reasons. One is it gives you more precise control over your reticle, but two is it has a very significant narrative impact. Leon is a professional. He doesn't miss, right?
If you miss, that's on you.
Yeah.
Leon doesn't miss. This is your fault.
No, I'm serious. Come to our, like at some point, come to our camp talk. We talk about Resident Evil a lot. But in the remake, what do you get? Just fucking bloom reticle. It's like it's Call of Duty.
Yeah, so
The
instead
hell?
of your bullet hits right here.
Yeah, you get a
your bullet
range.
hits
Somewhere in that area, you
here?
don't know. It might hit, it might not. The point is that it creates a disconnect between the character and the narrative, and instead it kind of puts some of the onus on you, and I don't like that. It's not what the original intended. Silent Hill 2. Okay, I know that there's a lot of fans of Silent Hill remake, and that's fine. I celebrate that for you, but hear me out. Look at the original. Setting aside the grain, like whatever, the grain is just part of the JPEG, it's fine. But look at how highly slung that camera is over James's shoulder, right? So it creates a feeling of loneliness, of isolation, how small you are in this world that is entirely covered by fog, that is basically virtually unknown to you. But having that camera slung low over the shoulder is going to create a feeling of partnership and intimacy. It's going to make everything feel smaller and much more zoomed in, right?
Yeah.
You're not looking at it from above. You're looking at it from below. And that creates, like, I mean, I love the screen space.
You are not watching him, you are now with him.
You're you know, like, I love the screen space reflections, but like, why does Silent Hill have to look realistic? It's not, right? It's not a real place. The whole meta narrative of Silent Hill is that, is this real? Question mark, right? And having that sort of realistic, very high fidelity detail definitely puts it in a real world for me. Don't like it. Okay, Metal Gear Solid 3. You probably know this about me if you've been to any of my talks. Big fan of Metal Gear games. 3 is the best one of them. Don't at me, I am factually correct. So here's the thing. Metal Gear Solid 3 has a very magical realism, almost Gabriel Garcia Marquez feel. You have real world events, but they're juxtaposed with, I don't know, bullet bees, a guy who can shoot lightning into bullets and fire them, right? It's pure nonsense. Like, you just have to accept it on faith. So what does putting Snake into Unreal Engine 5 that photorealistically and lovingly details every pore on his cheek do? It makes it real, right? I think that that's missing like 90% of the point, is that Metal Gear is not intended to be realistic. It's intended to be silly and goofy and campy. This grounds it, right? Unreal Engine 5 grounds it, and that's a problem. Okay, let's continue. So why are games being made? Yes, I'm going there. I am going there. The economic reasons, don't boo me. I have seen what makes you cheer. So the economic reasons for remakes. They were successful once, so they're going to be successful again. Skyrim.
Like we talked about, no one's going to take a big expensive risk without some guarantee of financial reward.
They were not successful before, so they might be successful again. Dead Space.
You know, everything after a while gets kind of a cult following, sort of how now Treasure Planet has this incredible cult following, even though no one watched it when it came out because it was horribly advertised. But now we all are desperate to see it again.
Because it takes time for us to age with the art we consume.
Like every couple of years, they keep saying there's going to be a new Firefly reboot.
God, I hope not. So, and then needing to consolidate the intellectual property. There's a reason Sony keeps making Spider-Man games. It's because they don't want to lose the copyright.
Yeah, this is also a big reason why Disney keeps making live actions, because some of their older media is starting to come up on the copyright timeline where it enters the public domain. Not all of it, but some of it. It's not, I mean, like, there's no reason, you know, Moana's not entering the public domain anytime soon, but many of the older ones are starting to get close to the public domain, so now they can extend that copyright.
And then the last reason is that they just lost the code.
Yep.
You guys remember the disastrous Silent Hill 2 remaster? Do you know why it is the way it is? They lost the source code. Because they didn't keep it. They were like, wait, we're not going to need this. Like, we're not going to need to remake this game. Why? It sold like 2 copies.
Yeah, and then, you know, there's also the
Years
thing that,
later.
like, I will always bring things back to Dragon Age. Dragon Age Origins, the reason they won't do a remaster is because they can't. That code is on a software that, like, I think 10 people in all of BioWare know how to use.
And pretty soon it's going to be 0 because BioWare is about to be gone.
Yeah, so they would have to remake it from the ground up. There is no remastering it.
So let's kind of bring this around, then I can go on my unhinged rant about things. So are remakes good or bad? Well, I mean, it kind of depends.
Yeah.
What are you looking to get out of it, right? So, like, in terms of preservation, sure. Like, historically speaking, they are iterative they're improving on the original. But the question is, are we treating the original as a product or as art? If we're treating it as art, why does it need to be improved upon?
Yes.
If we're treating it as product, why couldn't the product be made so that it lasts, right?
There's also the argument of games are disappearing. Servers are going down. Anyone who's played a mobile game and got really addicted to it knows that their favorite game is disappearing. So a lot of people are trying to remake them in the emulator style as opposed to a like big AAA release remake, just to try to save them in whatever way they can.
So there are some salient points to be made about why remakes need to be like updating them for preservation or accessibility. Like, you know, certain older games are just like very differently abled people adverse.
Yeah.
Like font might be too small, or like the color might not match like color blindness. So like including these things is great. Like that's a really good reason to do a remake. But on the other side of that argument is updating them for money, copyright consolidation, and just simply because you can, right?
Yeah.
And like no one's going to update a game just because they want to make a couple of other people feel included. That's not the company's bottom line, right? So.
And then what it comes to is like, so like I said, I'm a conservator, I'm a restorer. We are taught, one, you have to study art history. You cannot get through this degree without art history classes. It's because you have to understand the original artistic intent of what you are working on. When we work on pieces, we do not change them at all. We are trying to preserve what they originally looked like for people for as long as possible. So the idea to me of remaking something and then changing it is anathema to preserving it for the future. To 180 on that completely, when you make something in a particular time period and you are using the aesthetics and the zeitgeist of that time period to make a point, several years down the road, you're not making the same point, because what was a salient, interesting political point in the 80s, if you show that exact same film nowadays, does not hit the audience the same way. We see things differently. We have many, many years of zeitgeist on top of what was originally said. So if you're trying to make that same point to a modern audience, you have to update the way you're making that point, or you're not making that point anymore.
100% agree. Okay. Hi, guys.
This is all you, baby.
Okay, so, you know, the reason this panel came about is because I was playing Resident Evil 4 Remake, and I have a fairly old video card. Well, you know, I have a 3080 Ti, and my processor needed to be updated recently because we bought Dragon Age the Veilguard, and it was chugging. So I was like, all right, cool, I'll update it to the next thing up, which is like an i500. So, like, I have a mid-tier rig. I will never have an updated rig at this point because NVIDIA has made this impossible. But the point is that that's how this panel came about, is that I was playing it, I'm like, why am I having not as much fun with this incredibly beautiful game that I, in theory, should love, right? So I did some thinking about it, and we have some points. Point number one, graphics are a scam, especially NVIDIA. Thank you. I will be giving autographs at the door. If you guys want to send, that clip to Jensen Huang, go right ahead. The police will be escorting me out of the business building shortly. Okay, so let me ask you a question. How many of you can tell the difference between PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 graphics? Easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Easy.
PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3. Easy.
Easy.
PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. Yeah. PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5.
Liars. You're lying.
I don't think you're lying, but I think it's going to be very, very tricky.
Yes.
Why is that?
Yes.
Exactly. We are reaching the singularity of technology. There is simply nothing for us to improve upon. So here's the thing. Like PlayStation 5 Pro, right? Remember what they advertised? It like, oh yeah, it's going to have like DLSS and it's going to have like this thing where like the frames are regenerated. Okay, you know what PlayStation 5 Pro is? It's a slightly better hard drive with a little more RAM. That'll be $200 extra, please.
The human eye can only, the human eye can only see so much detail. Like, our eyes are incredible, but we can only see so much detail. There's a point where we hit terminal velocity and there's nothing past it.
The human eye cannot tell the difference between 10,000 tries and 100,000 tries. And also, here's a really interesting point for you to ponder on. Games are fun, right? Like, they're games. They're intended to take us out of reality. Why do we need to make them look real? Like, what is this obsession with photorealism? And I'm posing this question to all of you as a rhetorical. Think about that on your own time. Why do you need your games to look like real life? Because we already have film, but even film does not capture reality the same way the human eye does, right? Like, it would be the most boring movie ever if it was just like, how many of you have seen like Richard Linklater's movies? Like, I mean, they're good, they're beautiful, they're pristine, but like, they're boring.
Also, there is something to be said. You cannot take the 3D into the 2D and make it look real.
Yeah.
You just can't. It is still 2 dimensions in front of you. It's still flat.
I will tell you this. Realism is the death knell of art because art is intended to be not real. Art, by definition, is something on its own, right? It exists apart from realism. It is a verisimilitudinous representation of realism. It is not intended to be real, number one. Number two, the monogenre. Okay, how many of you watched the Video Game Awards? Cool. How many of those games were, it's X but Y? Oh, it's Final Fantasy, but it's Sekiro. Oh, it's this, but it's that.
How many times have we been advertised to you and we're like, oh, it's a Metroidvania, it's a roguelike.
It's a Soulsborne.
Yeah.
Right. Like, okay, everything is coming to a genre singularity to the point because we need to flatten that curve. Games that are unique in their appeal are very, very niche, right? Think about the variety of different gameplay styles. How many of you remember the original 1998 cryo interactive game Dune?
Oh,
2 people,
yes.
amazing. Come talk to me afterwards, we have words. So that game was amazing because it was an adventure game, but it wasn't an adventure game. It was kind of a narrative storybook that also had like real-time strategy elements to it, right? You can't make a game like that because it would be too all over the place. Nobody would buy it because it's like, well, how do I level up? Bro, you don't. Okay, you don't level up in Dune. You just watch it for the pretty graphics and the images and like just enjoy it, right? Just go with the vibes. But everything has to have like progression elements. It has to have like character building. It has to have like parrying. Like forget parrying. Like whatever. I hate parrying. I love it because I love Sekiro. But parrying as a mechanic needs to go away for a while. Thank you.
But yeah, everything. It's if you're like me and you're unfortunately on the book talk side of TikTok all the time, everything you're being sold is a trope now. You're not told a plot, you're told it's mid-spice, enemies to lovers, there was only one bed. This tells me nothing about your story.
All right. This, in keeping with the PG rating of this panel, I will preface this by saying when I say Gunnar, I don't mean like, I mean like everything has to be constantly recursive. Here's the thing, your time and attention are finite. Have you noticed how games are taking advantage of that? It took me 6 years to finish Assassin's Creed Odyssey. 6 bloody years. Do you know why? Because I had to do everything. And there's a lot to do in that game.
Yes.
It took me 6 years.
Games are no longer a one and done narrative. Right. You have to play it over and over and over again.
Yeah. Oh, are you done with it? Oh, well, we have extra content that's user generated. You can play. Thanks, Assassin's Creed. I don't want to, but you have to.
Yes. And
okay,
it sort of comes from, we have no money and we're all dopamine starved, right? So we want value for what we put our time and energy into. And how many of you have seen damn near every reviewer out there talk about the time to money ratio on whether or not they enjoy a game?
Yeah.
Well, now game makers see those reviews and they see, hey, the best way to sell our game is to offer a whole lot of time for your $70.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be good time, doesn't have to be unique time, it can be extremely repetitive, grindy time, but it's time for money.
Yep. And then the dopamine economy, obviously. They keep making them because we keep buying them. I bought Resident Evil 4. What does that say about me? I mean, I was one of like the multiple millions of people who purchased it, but I still bought it. So, we all want to feel good. Okay, so let me talk very quickly about this part. So this is our contact info. That's my website. That's where I put my photography. That's Caitlin's Instagram. That's where she puts all her bookmaking stuff.
I am very serious. This is not a polite, send us questions.
Yeah,
even if
please
it's 3 o'clock in the morning
because
and
this
you're
is, sorry.
We love talking about this stuff, obviously.
Yeah.
The way these panels happen is we start watching something or doing something and then we talk at each other for 3.5 hours and then we go, oh, this is a panel. So we really like talking about it and we're starting to bounce off each other a whole lot. So give us more people to talk to about these things, please.
So grab a screenshot of that, send us messages. Ideally, this is not a 1-hour talk. This is like something that could take up an entire college semester's worth of conversation.
This is unfortunately one of those goldfish topics where the more time you have, the more it fills.
Yeah, we were talking about this, if we had an hour and a half, we would probably still fill it up with information, right?
Yeah.
So at this point, go ahead and take a photo of that. There is a microphone right here. Please feel free to come up and ask us questions for the next 10 minutes. After that, we do have to clear out of here, but if you have questions, go right ahead.
Questions,
the floor
comments,
is yours.
concerns.
We will answer them to the best of our ability.
Thank you for coming. I know that was a lot very quickly. We appreciate you staying and keeping up.
All right, my friend, come on up. You're up first.
I wanted to share.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to share a hot take of mine, which is that the Link's Awakening remake and Pokemon Diamond and Pearl are some of the worst content Nintendo's put out. Because you're taking
Yeah.
pixelated graphics and turning it into
Yeah. No, this is the new one that came out with the really terrible. The new Pokemon game that came out that everyone was really mad about. Yeah, I saw about that. I was really pissed off that like there was so little work put in. It's no, that's
Well,
the thing.
the-
Like we have a lot of nostalgia for how we felt when we first played these games, and by updating them to these sleek new modern graphics, you remove that charm that we're so in love with.
Yeah, this is that
You
Marshall
remove-
McLuhan thing. The medium is the message. Yeah.
You remove the personality. And sometimes that personality was just because the technology forced it to look like that. But when you have the choice, you have the ability to make the aesthetic choice, and you don't, and like you do something else, you've killed what we loved about it. Yeah. Thank you. Hello. Birds of a feather.
Thoughts on like these like 3D, 2D, like Live Alive, Octopath Traveler style remakes of like old SNES games?
Like on the one hand, I think virtual reality is very interesting and it is a very like new way to experience things. On the other hand, it's still trying to make the 3D, the 2D, like it's still kind of 2D, really.
Yeah.
It's not really 3D yet. If you're having fun, enjoy it. But they're kind of at this point, to me, they're often just showing off the new technology, as opposed to making a point.
That being said, I think Octopath Traveler is a great game.
Yeah. Hello.
Shoot.
So I'm guilty of this too, so I don't think I'm throwing shade or anything.
No, throw shade. We like it.
Okay.
We'll just fight you afterwards.
Ever wonder in your analysis of these things that you're looking at it backwards? What I mean by that is like the Silent Hill 2 remake. They're like, oh, the camera's pulled back. Oh, because you're disconnecting stream, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
If you played the remake first, would you be sitting here going, the camera's closer, I feel closer to it, it's more personal?
Well,
But I didn't play the remake first.
oh,
I played the remake last. So while it's a valid point, you also have to talk about like not the order in which the art is experienced, but the order in what art is chronologically created, because that has a lot of bearing on it, right? Like you can't say the same thing like, oh well, like the Mahler symphony is better than the Beethoven symphony because it has more people in it, right?
But yeah, we are people and we are fallible and we have our preferences. So that is the thing about academia and about presenting things like this
Right.
is that we are going to present what we have seen over time and time
Right.
and time and time.
Yeah,
We can't
and-
know everything and we will have our biases. And you're right, we could just be like, hey, I don't like it because I don't like it.
And I wasn't trying to be combative about this, but because it's a really salient point. Like the way in which you experience something is very important. But also, but my personal opinion is the chronology matters, right? Because Silent Hill 2 came first, then came the remake. The remake would not have existed without the original, right? Yeah. Okay, no, but it's a great question. I would love to talk to you more about this because it's a really good point you're making, right? But yeah, that's my
Absolutely.
take. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hello. I don't think it is, but we
I don't
can
know
hear
if it
you,
is,
so you're
but
good.
yeah.
First, just a quick comment. The Dune 1 soundtrack.
Oh, so great.
So I'm introducing him to a lot of newer games. And
Great.
His first real video game experience is Breath of the Wild. And
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
a good
great.
one.
I'm going back and introducing to like Skyward Sword, and it feels a little bit more janky.
Right.
Yes.
Operating time is like painful. So
Yeah.
how about like updating or changing the game standards?
Right. Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like in terms of accessibility, right? There's certain remasters that improve the control scheme, and that's really good.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, we talked about how some of these old games are just so hard no one plays them anymore.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that reasons people want to remake them is to make them more accessible to a wider audience so that more people can play. Because I'll be honest, I'm bad at video games. I love them. I'm terrible at them. I don't play older games simply because I can't do it. I don't have the skill. So the fact that more modern games and more remakes let me play these older games that I would not have gotten to experience otherwise is another thing in favor of remakes.
all right, friends. Real quick. we do need to vacate
yeah.
the spot. But
We have to go.
But hold on. All of you who are waiting here to ask a question, we want to answer them. Can we do it outside of the panel?
Yes,
They reset for
yeah.
the other. We do want to talk to you.
We are
promise.
happy to answer your questions. We just have to clear the room for the
Yeah.
the hall.
And it'll
We
probably
will
be easier
out in the
because we can
hallway.
tag team this.
We'll be out in the hallway. Surround us as
Yeah.
like a herd of wounded gazelles.